BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Nerd 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Okay, and welcome to part 2 of our November AMA. That's an Ask Me Anything. We did a part 1 to this recently, and I really found that most of the questions that I was talking about and answering were related to the Zodiac Killer, and I thought it would be very good to do a part 2 because we already do our monthly Zodiac Killer Q&A session, and with AMA it's also about covering a variety of different subjects. So I would like to drop a quick announcement to people who have been following our segments on the Zodiac Killer. We will be doing the next piece on Richard Hoffman coming out tomorrow. And to people who are listening to these things in the future, we have a series on Richard Hoffman and his connections to the Zodiac Killer mystery, because Richard Hoffman is tied into some different types of theories about the case in general. And that's really the only way that I can say it in a nutshell version, because he's one of the responding officers after the Blue Rock Springs shooting on July 4th of 1969 in the Zodiac Killer mystery, and then people are looking at some other possible and alleged connections that we can see with Richard Hoffman. That will come out tomorrow. And as for now, I would also like to drop the other updates that this channel might be going through some evolutionary things in the future. Instead of putting out a short segment that we do every day, it might have to turn into only 3 days a week instead of 7. And the good news about that is I'll be able to make longer uploads for you guys, maybe 40 minutes to an hour. It would be something to the effect of a Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing, but that'll definitely happen later on, because we are first going to do our book discussion on the myth of the Zodiac Killer. I asked you guys what you wanted to hear, and people just responded in the comments section. And you voted to hear about The Myth of the Zodiac Killer, the book by Thomas Henry Horn. So we will be doing that one before there are any types of major changes with the channel. And the direction of the AMA is that it's an Ask Me Anything, just reading off your questions and comments, and we're discussing some things, but I have to borrow a particular question from a different channel. I found this podcast called PLL, that's Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, and it's often just referred to as PLL Radio. And they were doing an AMA on their channel. Just by coincidence, I happened to click on one of their episodes, and it turned out they were doing an AMA as well. And one of the questions asked was something that I thought was rather interesting. And if anyone would like to give their response to this as kind of an icebreaker, you can write your answer in the comment section below. It's a two-part question. First, if you were to move anywhere in your state that you live in now, and if you're from a different country, your province or whatever region you live in, if you could move anywhere in your state, where would you go? And then if you could move anywhere in your country, where would you go? And my answer to that is, if I had to move anywhere in my state, I would go to a place called Waiteville, which is in the far south of West Virginia. I'm actually in sort of the northeast, for lack of a better term. Many of our American states are all just all kinds of weird-looking lines and such. But yes, I would go to a place called Waiteville, which is in the Jefferson National Forest. The Jefferson National Forest is heavily in Virginia, but part of it crosses over into West Virginia. And if I could live anywhere in the country, I would probably say, if we did not have any coronavirus, I'm tempted to go to San Diego, but California has its own set of setbacks. Okay, that is just something that I thought was... I've never really had a question that had come out just like that. But if we want to talk about some things associated with true crime, we recently mentioned the Chris Watts case on this channel, and Chris Watts is, of course, in jail right now for murdering his family, his wife Shanann, his daughters Bella and Celeste, and his unborn child. His wife Shanann Watts was pregnant at the time. And we did an upload recently on the channel called The Watts Family Murders Next Door, because there was a Netflix special that had come out with a similar name. And we had a comment coming to us from Shani Stott that says, "Do you believe that Nicole K., Chris Watts' mistress, was more involved? She searched for Chris and Shanann on Facebook before they were even dating." And one of the reasons why the Chris Watts case gets so much attention and so much focus is because people want to know exactly what happened, the motivations, and also, were there any other active minds in the planning and the murders of Shanann Watts and Bella and Celeste? As we said, the Watts family murders. And Nicole K., referring to Nicole Kessinger, sometimes pronounced Kessinger, is the girlfriend, Chris Watts' mistress, whatever name you would like to call her. And I think that that's a very plausible statement, but that's all I can really say about it. And that's something that I would really like to investigate more. And we had a recent comment come in on the Chris Watts episode that we did, talking about how Chris Watts has confessed to the murders. He's been tried and convicted. He is going to be in jail for the rest of his life, plus 84 years. What really else is there to say? Well, a lot of us don't always find that very satisfying. Sometimes we want to learn a little bit more because it gives us that greater understanding of humanity. And sometimes there perhaps could be a very valuable piece of information, like this question is alluding to, that was Nicole Kessinger the central mind behind the planning, and that Chris Watts actually committed the murders, but he was doing it because he was coerced by her, or that she was the one who was involved with the planning process, the conspiracy to commit murder angles, and he was the one who just carried them out. I definitely would be wanting to look more into something like that. And because this is an Ask Me Anything, I have to look at this one question here from Postmark that says, "You listen to Jesse Lee Peterson, JFC." And I didn't know what JFC was, so I actually had to Google that, and it's Jesus fucking Christ. Do I listen to Jesse Lee Peterson? Yes, I do. He's the host of The Fallen State on YouTube, and he also hosts the Jesse Lee Peterson radio show. And they put that out on YouTube, but they don't archive the episodes. You might have heard of Jesse Lee Peterson. He's the guy that says, "That's amazing." And I've actually done a segment about him on this channel for Genius or Fraud when we were examining that, but I wasn't able to put it up. I just couldn't do it in any sort of good faith, talking about any type of material to that effect, because he became very political and also was just filled with unpopular opinions. And I was like, I want to talk about things on YouTube, and any subject is fair game. But when we're examining that type of material, the political stuff, I'm just sort of asking myself, what's the point of just putting out there some things? Well, you can listen to different points of view. Okay, I get it. We already know that. We don't really need to have that regurgitated, especially when you're also putting out some things that are just very bland and such. And that's what I thought my presentation on Jesse Lee Peterson was, too bland. Earlier this year, when my schedule was different, I would be listening to his show in the mornings because, as I said, there's that live stream on YouTube, even though it's not archived. And I would catch about an hour of it every day, especially last winter. And from time to time, I catch episodes of The Fallen State. But the reason why I was talking about it on the channel was Jesse Lee Peterson interviewed an individual named Sam Tripoli, who made the claim that everything that Ted Kaczynski wrote in the Unabomber Manifesto was true. Or what he said was most of the things that the Unabomber said in the manifesto were true. And I couldn't accept that. I had to read the thing for myself. And I did read the Unabomber Manifesto. And, it's very technical, it's very argumentative, it's criticizing industrial society, and it's criticizing the future that would come from industrial society. And I hope to talk more about Ted Kaczynski in the future. As I said, tomorrow we're going to be talking about Richard Hoffman, but some point this week, if not this week, then next week, I would like to do a larger episode on Ted Kaczynski, or perhaps look at some other things tied into the Zodiac Killer mystery. Maybe get back in touch with Mark Hewitt, who has written 3 different books about the Zodiac Killer, but he goes down linking the Zodiac Killer mystery to the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, and he becomes Mark Hewitt's prime suspect in the Zodiac Killer mystery. I would love to learn more about that stuff because, if anything, you can just see there's if anything, we might just learn something, because we had some recent comments come in from an individual. I hope I get your name right. Is it Ben Ais? Someone had to help me out with that one because it's written in some different characters. And what he said is Ted was articulate and spot on with his spelling. I don't think he ended up being the Zodiac Killer upon his anti-tech message, because although his intention was to inflict terror and spread his message, most of his bombs were non-lethal, but the Zodiac was obviously intent on killing people. So that's something there to think about. And then, because with the Zodiac Killer, there definitely are things that are about sending a message. I mean, the Zodiac is all about messages, right? The letters, the ciphers, the phone calls, the car door at Lake Berryessa. But when we want to look at some things that are associated with the Unabomber, I definitely think Ted Kaczynski wanted his ideas taken seriously. But there are murders that are attributed to the Zodiac Killer. I mean, there are definite murders. We have the 4 canonical crimes, but there might be some other things that we could discuss with that, because not everybody accepts that all of those were committed by the same person. That's why we're going to be doing the book discussion on The Myth of the Zodiac Killer by Thomas Henry Horn, which says in a nutshell that there were murders that happened in 1968 and 1969, but they weren't committed by the same person. One person took credit for it by writing a series of letters and having some ciphers mailed in that somebody else most likely wrote, and we can talk about that one in our future book discussion. Right now, what I would like to do is to go over to a recent upload that we did on the channel talking about John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer, and an individual named Jason Moss, who wrote a book called The Last Victim. Jason Moss began corresponding with John Wayne Gacy, as well as some other individuals who were in prison, such as Richard Ramirez, Charles Manson, and some other people who were incarcerated as well. And he wanted to learn more about serial killer psychology, or just about these individuals who have been incarcerated, who are very high profile. And let's just read off a comment here from Apex Prowler, who had something to say about Jason Moss and John Wayne Gacy. Right after I listened to your podcast, I found The Last Victim on audiobooks on YouTube and gave it a listen. Pretty creepy listen. What that guy, referring to Jason Moss, what that guy didn't understand is that it's more than just a physical destruction with these serial killers. They are the ultimate mental manipulators. Messing around with them is not in the best interest of a layperson. And this was an absolutely excellent comment. Thank you, Apex Prowler. And Jason Moss would actually go on to commit suicide on the 6th of June, 2006, 6606. And some people even think that perhaps his studies into the minds of serial killers may have taken a darker turn, because one of the things that he was really getting into were occult angles and connections, and 666 was a very big deal back in June of 2006. What we can say about this one is, I would actually like to go down a pathway sharing just something a little bit more personal if we're going to be talking about Jason Moss and John Wayne Gacy. And this was back when I was in the 9th grade. I must have been around 14 at the time. And in our phys ed class, we had this type of intramural basketball league. And there was this kid named Chris. He was the shortest kid in the class, and he was not good at playing basketball. If he were to try and shoot a free throw, the ball couldn't even make it to the hoop. Nobody wanted to play with him. It's not like being picked last in gym class. That happened to me plenty of times. No, they didn't even want him to play. So what this guy Chris did was he went to one of the team captains, whose name was Alex. And Alex wasn't the brightest bulb in the shed, but he had been appointed the team captain by the gym class teachers all the same. So Chris goes to him and says, hey, when you're a team captain and you're picking people to be on your team, you should take Bobby first, because Bobby is very tall and he's a good basketball player. And Alex is like, yeah, okay, I agree. And then Chris is telling him, hey, maybe you also want a short person who can dribble closely to the ground and is going to be good for passing. And then Alex is like, yeah, okay, I agree. So what happened? Alex chose for Bobby to be on his team, and then someone else chose their teammate, and then Alex is like, I want Chris. And for the first time, Chris has been picked for a team, and he had this smile that started grinning, glowing on his face and such, and then Bobby just erupted and says, why did you pick Chris? He sucks. What is wrong with you? And I've never seen anyone's face get redder and just someone just about to explode, and he's just like, oh my God, and he just walks away and says, fine, I don't have to play. And I've told this story once before, and someone asked, you're Chris, right? I was like, no, I'm not Chris, I'm Ned. It's not about me, actually, but it's the exact same thing, though. It's the exact same message that was going on with this material involving Jason Moss and John Wayne Gacy. He thought that he could manipulate the situation. He thought that he could put his plan into action. And the whole thing is, though, with Jason Moss trying to correspond with serial killers just to try and rig the system and just to try to learn more about them by writing the letters. And he thought he could play mind games with the serial killers, but they could also be trying to play mind games with him. Just because he wanted to do something, it doesn't mean that other people are just going to sit back and let him do it. The same thing happened to Chris on the basketball court that happened to Jason Moss. He thought, oh, well, I'm just going to try and write these letters to serial killers and I'm going to get inside their head, but he didn't account for how manipulative the serial killers could be. And one final thing about Jason Moss and John Wayne Gacy. On our upload, actually, if you would like to listen to that one here on this channel, it is called The Suicide of Jason Moss and Dear Mr. Gacy and the Last Victim. And Dear Mr. Gacy was the film that they made based on that one. If you'd like to hear that one on this channel, that's the title of it, The Suicide of Jason Moss. And I also highly recommend the film Dear Mr. Gacy with William Forsythe. But there's a comment on that upload that comes to us from DJ Devon3 that says, there exists something known as epiphenomenon. Excuse me, it's a big word, hard to say. Epiphenomenon. Spending too much time talking to psychopaths can mess with certain types of people regardless of professional training. Jason Moss was too arrogant and didn't respect the danger he was putting himself in. He put himself in a position that is better left to seasoned criminal psychologists. You do not put a young, impressionable mind in an unmonitored, lockered room with a psychological predator. And Jason Moss dealt with a lot of those drawbacks and a lot of those experiences, and he never really got over it. And as we said, he committed suicide in 2006. Thank you to everyone who left some comments on those. And we also have an upload on this channel called The Psychology of Serial Killers, and I would like to look at some comments that were left on that one. We have one from Michael McJenkins who says, here is something else that you see time and time again, provided that observation is a key component to someone's life. Those who grew up manipulated and or poor are often unaware of missing wealth, power, or influence. Those who had it throughout life, the wealth, influence, and resources, etc., are so often seen to stoop to the lowest levels in order to maintain it when they feel that it is threatened, regardless of the wherefores and facts of the potential loss. And that's something that I think is important to think about as well, because, I mean, we were just saying some of this stuff in a recent upload. I think it was actually on the Chris Watts upload, just talking about the patterns that we see time and time again. And I think Michael is onto something here. And on that note, there's an individual named Frank Gomez, whom we haven't talked about here on this channel, but he became somewhat of a rather famous con man. And he even talked about how you can go in and out of jail for particular reasons. And one of the reasons that he stated was something that is quite similar to what Michael was talking about, a few differences, but it's quite similar, saying that the reason why he kept committing crimes was once you get used to a particular lifestyle, it's very difficult to get out of it. And what he was talking about was not even committing crimes, but just maintaining that status, maintaining a particular financial status and the lifestyle that comes with being very affluent and the lifestyle that becomes from being somewhat financially successful. And like the efforts that he had to go to maintain that lifestyle were often very criminal, and he would just go in and out of jail for a variety of different things. And Frank Gomez went on to become a sort of con man going down the pathway of Frank Abagnale, the guy from Catch Me If You Can, doing some very outrageous things. Frank Abagnale is someone whom we haven't talked about on the channel before, but I think that a lot of things that he did were very outrageous. I think Frank Abagnale had a very high IQ, and I mean, I'm sure many of you have seen the movie about him, Catch Me If You Can, with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. But it's I think that some of the things out there are just almost even just a little bit misrepresented. The guy was just really good at learning. And also, the things that I learned from Frank Gomez were that the reason why you get away with so many things like that is because people simply just aren't paying attention. They just aren't looking. Frank Gomez said that very clearly. When he would apply for a job, he would just write down fake references, and people would call the fake phone numbers were just his phone numbers. And then he would give himself a fake reference. Oh yeah, I worked with Frank. Yeah, great guy, hard worker, absolutely perfect in every single way. And the other person on the other end of the line is like, okay. I mean, I really think, though, only maybe 5 times in my whole life people have actually checked those references on resumes and such. But this ties into another individual that we've been talking about with serial killer discussions, and his name is Herb Baumeister, who is the I-70 Strangler. We talked about him a lot in October because we did an episode called I was talking about the ghosts of Fox Hollow Farm. Fox Hollow Farm, I want to make sure that I said that clearly. And we also did another one called Herb Baumeister, the Indiana serial killer. And the reason why is because on Fox Hollow Farm, the estate that he used to live on, he discarded the bones of his victims, and a lot of people believe that it's a very fertile ground for ghost hunting, or some prime real estate for ghost hunting, we should say. But to get away from that for a second, My hypothesis or my inclination, the thing that I just have the smallest feeling about is that the reason why a serial killer like Herb Baumeister was able to operate was because he was just so gentle. He was just seemed so harmless and insignificant. People probably didn't like punishing him growing up. And by people, I mean the teachers. I mean the people or authoritative figures in his life. Because it started out in school. He did a sick prank once where he just picked up a dead bird, put it in his pocket, and then dropped it on the teacher's desk. And it was just, he really bothered his classmates by doing that. But it seemed like there weren't many consequences. The more famous story about Herb Baumeister is that he urinated on his boss's desk as just a sick joke, and they even mailed a letter to the governor, and he also urinated on that, but he wasn't fired. And I just began to notice that pattern with Baumeister is that he's talking about how he's experiencing all of these types of deviant behavior and nobody is doing anything about it. Well, what does that tell the person? That if I behave in this certain way, then I can deceive people. If I hide my destructive tendencies, then people aren't really going to think about them most of the time. And even if they slip out once in a while, people are going to be like, well, he's just such a gentle, harmless individual. Let's just give him a pass on that. And that is how I believe many of these types of serial killers are operating. Now, we had an interesting comment that came in on part 1 of our AMA for November that came up to us from an individual named Kelly Gable, who was talking about some possible connections between Robert Christian Hansen and an individual named Ralph Spinelli. And I think this is very important to talk about because I brought up Herb Baumeister. What people are really trying to look at now is to try and get away from some things associated with serial killers being lone wolf individuals. And instead, what they want to look at is how do these people interact? How do these people operate? And is there any type of serial killer network going on in the country? A lot of people think that there could be things like the smiley face killers where individuals are being murdered after they're coming out of bars, mostly somewhat successful, younger, Caucasian males. And we have a very similar theory going on in the United Kingdom called the Manchester Canals Pusher, which we have talked about here on this channel before. But we haven't done an exact upload on the smiley face killers theory because I don't seem to be a huge believer in that one. With the smiley face killers theory, I think that it's more about just when people are intoxicated near water sources, there's a higher risk of drowning. But to get away from that one, when you look at how many serial killers are preying on sex workers, right? And gay serial killers like Herb Baumeister or Jeffrey Dahmer or bisexual killer like John Wayne Gacy, they're targeting men. Where did Herb Baumeister meet gay men? At the gay bar. And these individuals start having certain hotbeds of activities or just locales where they can go to find victims. Whether it's these strip clubs in Alaska that Kelly was asking about, do you think there's any connection between Ralph Spinelli owning a salon in Alaska and Robert Christian Hansen being a serial killer from Alaska? I mean, he was the serial killer, the butcher baker who preyed on sex workers mostly. And you can see that these individuals that we're talking about in the true crime world, it's perhaps they have crossed paths, perhaps they have interacted with each other at some point, or just that there are certain points in the United States of America, certain locations where serial killers are more likely to frequent. And that's why these individuals are going there. So there actually is a type of network going up. Like this serial killer goes to this location, they murder a victim, then they maybe even interacted with a traveling serial killer that goes from place to place. Or perhaps the victims are also coming in from different places and it all becomes interconnected. And there actually could be some type of unconnected serial killer network, not like a gross calculated conspiracy where all the serial killers are exchanging text messages and phone calls. No, I don't think anything like that would happen, but more or less that people are documenting the interactions that people are having and they're finding out where are the areas that are vulnerable in society. And you're looking at that many people cross paths with one another as they go through these things. So yeah, there's a network. It's the product of an inefficient and ineffective society, the one that we live in now. So I think another thing that we should say about that is that also many of the individuals that we talk about on this channel have been through some type of bizarre psychological experimentation. We talk a lot about Charles Manson, and even beyond experimentation, just the idea that Charles Manson was a CIA informant or that he was the product of some sort of some Scientology indoctrination, studying Scientology for more than 100 hours in prison. It might even be more than 150 hours. And Ted Kaczynski also going through almost some type of psychological mutilation in a certain sense. We mentioned that during our uploads on Mae Brussel, the host of Dialogue Conspiracy, talking about some of her things that she was investigating, talking about how when people step outside the conventional norms of society, they can be psychologically mutilated. But that's that's almost even a mischaracterization of the quote. But that is a big takeaway that I had from that. So you're looking at how these people could also be interacting in some type of network. By network, we just mean there are different interactions and crossing paths. And the CIA really seems like it is doing experiments on people. And those were the claims that Mae Brussel really wanted to talk about. Mae Brussel, as a conspiracy theorist, as I understand this, had some big things that she wanted to contribute. Number one, she wanted to say that the Nazis from Germany after World War II did not disappear. They didn't go away. And in fact, they even infiltrated the elite circles in the United States of America. And number two, the American CIA was responsible for an enormous amount of psychological experimentation on individuals. They wanted to look at how do people respond to things like psilocybin. They wanted to look at how do people respond to things like interrogation techniques, and how can they push the limits of humanity to make someone more murderous. All of these things. So you see that there could be some type of documented interconnection between people who have been through certain types of serial killing, who've been through certain types of psychological experimentation. People who have been through certain types of psychological experimentation and then go on to become serial killers, or somebody like Charles Manson, who, quote unquote, had his followers commit the murders for him, so thinking that he would not get caught. But that's a whole bunch of kettles of fish all at once. Now, if you'd like to hear more about this stuff, I would recommend an upload to you on this channel called More Serial Killer Talk Radio. And I've really been meaning to do more of those things. Like how we were just talking about right now, about how there could be some type of interconnection of all these different serial killers, a serial killer network. That's an idea that I would really like to explore in the future. So big thank you to Kelly for even bringing up the subject. But what I can say about it is we've done a couple uploads on this channel called Serial Killer Talk Radio and More Serial Killer Talk Radio. And I want to do a future segment called Another Serial Killer Talk Radio, where we just look at how do serial killers function? How do they start? And are there any other things that are heavily neglected by the documentaries? Because I more or less find that it's more people on the podcast circuit that are really trying to weigh the merit of the idea, and they're definitely not very mainstream when they're saying, hey, there actually could be some type of interconnection with all of these things, even if it's just as simple as, okay, these areas are transportation zones where there is a place where sex workers operate, or maybe a gay bar or some type of burlesque outfit is going on, and this becomes a vulnerable area where people are being heavily targeted. And we could find this all throughout San Francisco. We talk a lot about the Zodiac Killer here on this channel. Look what happened in the 1970s. You had a serial killer like the Black Doodler who would target gay men after gay bars, and they have a composite sketch of him. And if I understand that, we've done one upload on the Black Doodler on this channel. It's possible that he was somebody who maybe has been identified, but the police may not have made certain arrests. They may not have made an arrest. It's possible. Allegedly. I mean, I'm just some guy who reads this stuff on the internet and listens to podcasts and watches YouTube videos like anybody else. I don't have any type of insider information on that stuff. But perhaps in the future, maybe we'll see. All right, well, that's all for me now. Thank you to everybody who's left comments for this AMA and asked some questions and just wanted to talk about some subjects on the channel. And also, big thank you to PLL Radio for their contribution. Thank you to Marie D. Jones, who wrote the essay on Mae Brussel that we've discussed here on this channel. And thank you to you guys for listening. Couldn't do this without you. It's been absolutely great doing this show every day, but in the future, we will probably be doing things Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's all for me now. I will see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And if you would like to check out that upload on More Serial Killer Talk Radio, the best way you can support this channel is just by listening to some more content, never asking for any money. All you got to do is listen. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so. And once again, see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.